A pleasure to meet all at last, and here we are at it again with video games that are totally awesome. So, for this instance of VGTATA, yeah, I feel like I've gotten the rhythm for it now, I'm going to, of course, continue onward with some more regarding the ATV Offroad Fury series. Yeah, I've had a lot to say about the first two games, but this is the point where I can't say all that much about the series. ATV Offroad Fury 3. Unlike the other two, which had more live action cutscenes and an intro comprised of popular bands, even ones that are on the more obscured side, we do get ourselves a good hint of what Slipknot has had to offer. Yeah, we basically gone from rock to core to straight up metal. I mean, that makes you wonder though, is Death gonna be in the next one? Maybe next time here on this series. Anyways though, the intro is still pretty impressive. But the fact that they had gone for more of the animation style rather than implementing live action cutscenes does sort of bring about a sense of laziness. Also, let's not forget that unlike with the last two games, it's a bit different regarding the development and publication. Climax Racing was mainly the one involved in the development, while Sony Computer Entertainment was still the prime publisher, especially in the United States, while South Peak Interactive created the PAL version for publication purposes to Europe, especially in the UK and Germany and otherwise. So it's very different than the likes of Rainbow and Sony having full control and involvement in ATV Offroad Fury. So with the third game having a completely different set of standards, how exactly does it fare up? Well, the thing is that it also was the first title of the ATV Offroad Fury series to officially have a tie-in to the PSP or PlayStation Portable. ATV Offroad Fury Blazing Trails would be released a few months later. Yeah, the release of the original took place in November 2004 in the United States and February 2006 for Europe. And in 2005 was when the PSP game Blazing Trails would come around in the States. And later on in Europe. So you could basically wrap your head around the fact that there were a lot of different release and publication issues that were going on around. But nevertheless, Part 3 still did manage to be a pretty decent game, albeit being very different than the other two. Because right off the bat, having ourselves things that are much different in comparison does mean that 3 is likely not going to be as good as the other two. 2 was technically the finest that we had gotten there, so what exactly would make 3 not so great as the other two? Well, here's a couple things about it. There is a larger selection of vehicles to choose from. There's also a good amount of newer physics involved that allow for the controls to be a bit smoother, which at least helps knowing that the simplified control system that were found in the previous two games wasn't exactly all that practical. But in the end, we still do get a good amount of variety, not just the vehicles and the drivers and the customization features, but also the tracks as well as championship series. I mean, we don't exactly have much of the Supercross series like we did in the last two games, but in this instance, we do at least have something that's a bit different. We do have ourselves some newer championships, as well as the addition of mini games. Who would have thought? ATVs and mini games. I mean, aren't the races considered to be like mini games in their own unique way? Anyways, while customization is also technically a bit of an upgrade over the last game, we don't exactly get as much variety to work with. There are parts you can replace, some parts you can affix to the vehicle, some paint schemes, liveries, numbers you can change up for both the jersey as well as the vehicle itself. And there's also a good amount of gear that you can put together for your driver. So this technically would become more of a good baseline for customization purposes that would follow suit in later installments of the ATV Offroad Fury series, and even beyond that. When the MX vs. ATV came around by the early 2010s, the customization feature would also become a more common trait. Even to this day, with MX vs. ATV Legends, Monster Energy Supercross Edition, the latest ever piece of the MX vs. ATV lineage, that we've gotten so far, we've definitely had a good amount of customization even in that game. But a lot of things were actually based off of licensed properties. I mean, we had Honda in there, we had Suzuki in there, we had Phoenix in there, we had a good variety of different companies to work with here. And a good amount of purveyors that supplied many different items, including various vehicle components like the brakes, exhaust, tires, handlebars, seats, etc. And even the plastics would basically become customizable in many different ways. You could have all sorts of crazy color combinations put together. And in my experience with the MX vs. ATV Legends gameplay that I've done so far, even with the latest Monster Energy Supercross DLC all put together, I'd say I managed to get a pretty darn good level put together. So, when all that's said and done, there's no doubt about it. We could definitely do so much more with the customization nowadays. But back to 3 though. I will say that for the time being in 2004, sure it was a bit simpler in that time and not much more could have been involved, but some people would even agree that the simpler things are, the more they could possibly be on a more prominent and refined basis. As in when you compare it to most of today's games, which still feel pretty simple in comparison to what they could possibly be. I mean, we got ourselves not only the most impressive control schemes possible in order to make the race a unique challenge every time, but then there's also the open world capabilities of Legend, for instance, where you got collectibles to find all over the map. You got such places where you can practice your skills, some tracks that also double as their own championships. I mean, maybe MX vs. ATV Legends will have to wait until some other time. But overall, with ATV Off-Road Fury 3, yet another piece of the preliminaries that came along before the Supercross combination of both the MX and ATV lineage would merge into one. I'd say that Off-Road Fury 3, having had little to no gameplay with it at all, and certainly not with the 4th game, means I won't have all that much to say about it. And this is mostly just me coming along from the fact that there's plenty of people whom have experienced it, and maybe they could say a lot more about the game than maybe I ever could. But hey, since I did the first 2 games, I might as well share a few insights on what the 3rd and 4th games are like. So, the way I see it so far, it's probably only going to be a bit of a 6.8 out of 10.1. So, not quite anywhere near where the first 2 games were like. But who knows, maybe the 4th game is going to offer much more. It's actually much more different than the others thus far. So, tune in tomorrow, and I will do just that.